My name is Ebony Janice. I go by Ebony Janice, which means that you should call me Ebony Janice. And welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm here to talk about sovereignty, which I'm calling like homegirl, like being a homegirl, which is really about being home in yourself. And the first homegirl that I want to talk about is Zora Neale Hurston, who died largely forgotten. She also never stopped being exactly who she was, deeply seated in her home self. And I want to talk about what that cost, but why it's also worth it. So Zora Neale Hurston died in 1960 in a welfare home in Florida. She was buried in an unmarked grave. Her books were out of print. The woman who had been the most celebrated Black woman writer of the Harlem Renaissance died in obscurity and poverty. And that's wild to me to even think about, like, even though it's a thing that I've known, to say it out loud feels insane. Because I want to talk about why that happened and what her life means for this kind of homegirl framework that I'm building. So Zora Neale Hurston is actually the patron saint of a woman who refuses to leave her home, even when being home is actually expensive. She would not write the protest literature that the Harlem Renaissance was demanding. She would not make her work legible to the white gaze. She would not perform the kind of so-called dignified, respectable Black womanhood that would have made her more fundable. She went to the South. She collected folklore. She wrote in Black vernacular. Honestly, Zora Neale Hurston was a setup for, like, stop playing with me. I'm finna be Black, and that's what it is. But she stayed home, inside herself, inside her people, inside the traditions. And when everything else around her was telling her to assimilate, she understood something that actually, even though violently wasn't impactful in her living, impactful for her legacy. Richard Wright called Their Eyes Are Watching God a minstrel novel. Langston Hughes fell out with her, and they had major beef. She was dismissed, defunded, she was marginalized, but she stayed herself anyway. That, when I think about the time now, who do we know that could maintain that type of ethic? But it was Alice Walker who found her grave and put a marker on it. Alice Walker who introduces us to the language of womanism. The recovery of that, of Zora Neale Hurston and her legacy is womanism in action. This homegirl claim that I'm making about Zora Neale Hurston is that sovereignty does cost us something. It always has, and it always will. The question is not whether you can afford to be yourself. The question is whether you can afford to not be. Because while Zora Neale Hurston went home to herself and never left, 2 decades after her legacy, after her death, her legacy is infinite. We are all transformed by it. We're here sitting here talking about it right now, as a matter of fact, because of the fact that Zora Neale Hurston stayed seated. Now, it's not my hope that any of us, particularly myself, would die in obscurity as a result of staying home. But what I want to acknowledge is that we are in a completely different time frame where we have an amazing opportunity to do very profound, transformative work for ourselves and for our people. And it is essential, necessary, critical for us to be willing to find our home, our seated self, and stay there. That's true sovereignty. It feels small to end this by saying shout out to Zora Neale Hurston for everything that she's taught us and done for us.